Baldwin, and I'd like to talk to you about some of the amazing things the Screen Actors Guild Foundation does that you may not have heard about. The SAG Foundation is a nonprofit organization that helps to ensure that all actors have the support they need to follow their dreams. This includes providing a catastrophic health care safety net. When actors need help, we're there for them. Offering master classes and seminars so actors can work on perfecting their craft, as well as the opportunity to use their gift of storytelling to join the fight for children's literacy in their own communities and on the web. The SAG Foundation relies on contributions from people like you, so please visit us at sagfoundation.org to find out more about these programs and all the things your tax-deductible donations can help us do. Support the SAG Foundation. Act now.
Welcome to all of you here live and all of you somewhere else live too. My name is Jill Seltzer. I'm the Executive Director of the Screen Actors Guild Foundation, and we're delighted to host this Well Women's Expo this morning in what we consider one of the more flexible spaces in the entire Los Angeles area, maybe Los Angeles County. This is where we hold a lot of our screenings, a lot of our conversations, a lot of our board meetings and special events just like this one. And is it like being at home on the sofa? Yeah, I know. We also have a computer lab right next door. Actors can come in and use that anytime they want. There's a voiceover lab down the hall. We have staff in New York, a lot of us here in Los Angeles, and we're doing our best to go on the road and take a lot of our programming to the various locals around the country. So thank you for joining us here. The good news is that I get to introduce the first person who's going to start you on this morning's adventure and introduce all of the special panelists that we have. L. Scott Caldwell is on the board of the brand new SAG-AFTRA Board of Directors. She's here to introduce all of the panelists that will be talking with you this morning. And she and I both come from Chicago, so don't mess with us. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to first ever SAG-AFTRA Well Woman Health Expo and Fair, and thank you. I'd like to make sure that I acknowledge that we are in real time, and we are reaching our members across the country. And in New York, the membership there and our committee, made up of the Healthcare Safety Net Committee and the Women's Committee. The co-chairs there are Leslie Shreve for the Women's Committee and Kathy Lilly for Healthcare Safety Net. They're hosting an in-the-room event just like we are right now. So they've got people in the room watching this stream. And in a couple of hours, in real time, they will also be hosting an expo for women. And they'll be doing much the same thing that we'll be doing here at the Screen Actors SAG-AFTRA building here in Los Angeles. And right now, I'd just like to mention that we're setting up for free mammograms and breast exams downstairs. So we're very excited that we're going to be able to bring that to our membership. We have with us a very exciting, brilliant, amazing panel of healthcare experts, advocates, and survivors. And as I say, they're all very, very, very busy, but they've put their selves on pause today to be with us to bring what I believe will be life-saving information for all of us. Because the statistics statistics are so shocking in terms of the various things that can happen catastrophically to not only women but men's health, we could have almost done this event at any time of the year. We're obviously doing this during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but it could have happened at any time because heart disease is the #1 killer of women. Strokes are rampant. Diabetes, obesity, all kinds of diseases that can take you out have a calendar day or a month or a week. So we could have done this at any time, and hopefully in the future an event like this will be obsolete, because the hope is one day we'll all be living in whole health. That's what we're hoping for. But for today, we're bringing people to you that can help us understand what the risks are and what the solutions are to approaching whole health. And first I'd like to bring out Dr. Dennis Holmes. Dr. Holmes, Dr. Holmes wore his jacket so we'd know that he's a real doctor. Doctor, will you join me down here, please? Dr. Holmes was the first person to say yes, and as you can probably read about him on the program, he's the chief breast surgeon and medical director of the Los Angeles Center for Women's Health. It's a state-of-the-art, comprehensive, multi-specialty women's health center in downtown Los Angeles, and it's committed to improving women's health care. Dr. Holmes. Next, I'd like to bring out Dr. Kristie Funk. Dr. Funk is a board-certified, next to Dr. Holmes with the white jacket on. Dr. Funk is a board-certified surgical breast specialist and founder of the Pink Lotus Breast Center in Beverly Hills. She's an expert in minimally invasive diagnostic and treatment methods for all types of breast disease. Dr. Funk. Next, I'd like to bring out Nas Sykes. And Nas Sykes is the executive director of the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation. She currently serves in that position with a mission to eradicate breast cancer and improve the quality of women's health through innovative research, education, and advocacy. Nas Sykes. Okay. Next, I'd like to bring out Dr. Chrisandra Shufelt. Dr. Shufelt is the associate, right next to Nas there. Thank you. Dr. Shufelt is the associate director at the Barbra Streisand's Women's Health Center at Cedars-Sinai Health Institute. She's also the assistant clinical professor of medicine at the David Geffen School of Medicine at the University of California. And Dr. Shufelt directs the Menopause and Hormone program at the Barbra Streisand Women's Health Center. Dr. Shufelt, thank you. Next, I'd like to bring out Richard Roundtree. And from that applause, I see he needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He's a leading actor and audience favorite for the past 40 years. Richard Roundtree has established himself as a constant presence in television and film. During his career, he has starred in over 100 feature films and television projects. And most of you are going to, oh, you don't believe it? I'm reading it, says so right here. But you all know him as the man called John Shaft. And incidentally, Richard is a 19-year breast cancer survivor. Welcome to Richard. The next person I'm going to introduce is our moderator, who believes so strongly in what we are doing here today that she flew in from New York to be with us. She wears many hats. She's a lawyer. She's a journalist. She's an author of 2 best-selling books. And she herself is a survivor. Please bring to the stage our moderator, Star Jones.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. I have my red on because whenever I am in the presence of people talking about women's health, I let everybody know that as the National Volunteer for the American Heart Association, I go red every single day. I am pleased to join this panel as a panelist and as the moderator. And I think probably I should put it a little bit in context. I'd like Richard to share his survivor story, but so that you know that I'm not doing a job today, I thought it might be helpful for me to share mine. For the vast majority of my adult life, I was what was classified as morbidly obese. Not fat, P-H-A-T, not chubby, not fluffy, not plus size, not full-figured, straight up morbidly obese. 5'5" and 300 pounds, that's morbid obesity. The only person that can be 300 pounds is Shaq, and he has to run up and down the court for 45 minutes. So facing obesity and deciding to do something about it ultimately saved my life. I didn't know it at the time. I decided to have weight loss surgery and lose the physical weight, and then I went into therapy and lost the emotional weight so that I was able to keep it off. Starting out on the day of gastric bypass, they weighed me on an industrial scale, and I was 307 pounds. And I have celebrated my 9th anniversary in August, and I have kept 150 pounds off. The reason that's significant is because I started playing tennis, and I started walking and exercising. This is now 6 years ago. I just thought I was fly. I even had the nerve to wear some booty shorts one day. I really thought I was fly. No, you will never see those pictures. And I was really feeling good. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, if I tell the truth, I started to see I was short of breath. I would get these intense heart palpitations. And it would almost feel like somebody was punching me in the chest. I thought maybe this was some sort of residual effect of the gastric bypass. I was looking for zebras when I should have been looking for horses. Lightheaded every time I would go from seated to standing very quickly. And for all of the smartness and the degrees, I just did not know that these were classic symptoms of women's heart disease. None. And I see Dr. Shufelt sitting here going, yeah, dummy, absolutely. I mean, I went in to see my cardiologist, and he took all the requisite tests, and he said, the good news is you're going to be fine. So a big old smile came on my face. He said, but we're going to need to do some surgery. And I said, well, what kind of surgery? Because, you know, now all of a sudden my brain's starting to think, I am not going to need anything serious. Are they going to do these new things? Because I hear about it. I've done stories. They can go through your arm and all. He said, well, not so fast. we're going to need to do open heart surgery. I said, well, wait, I thought we would wait, hold on. And he said, you have an aortic valve malfunction. You have a genetic disorder, a subaortic membrane, and there is fluid building up around your heart. And we'd like to try to repair your aortic valve now so we don't have to replace it later. Then you'll have to decide, do you want a mechanical valve? Do you want a pig valve? I mean, my head was spinning. And if you don't, this is not an emergency right this minute, Star, but if you don't deal with it, it will become an emergency. And we don't want that. We don't want to end up to a point where we have to decide to replace the valve or, God forbid, a heart transplant. And I did what any self-respecting girl with a credit card would do. I got on a plane and flew to St. Bart's, okay? Because I said, oh, hell no. They don't have heart disease in St. Bart's. They have parties and champagne and beaches, and I'm going there. My girlfriends talked me back off the tree limb, and I returned to New York, and I went into, as my doctor says, Star Jones mode. I started to do everything that I was supposed to do. I made the agreement that I would do surgery the week before my 48th birthday, with the stipulation that I'd be home in time. And Dr. Fuster and, of course, my surgeon, Dr. Stelzer, they're brilliant at what they do. And 6 days after full-blown open heart surgery, I walked out of the hospital. And thank you, God. And I'm talking full-blown. I'm talking crack your chest, the whole 9 yards, you know, where they disconnect your heart and everything. You know, the Celebrity Apprentice people don't believe they ever connected it back, but they did. I promise you they did. It beats in there somewhere. And I decided there was my purpose. I was alive, and I made a phone call. My assistant didn't make a phone call. I made a phone call to the American Heart Association. I said, I'm yours. I am a real-life, walking, breathing survivor of heart disease. I never wanted to say this, but I am the new face of heart disease, and I'm tired of seeing old white dudes as the face. I need the women of America to know that it can happen to you. And this is extremely emotional for me today because it hit me on the plane. I'm alive because of this union. AFTRA and SAG paid for my entire open heart surgery. I had $6,000 of out-of-pocket expenses. My insurance paid all of it. It was unbelievable, and I thank them very much. So I'm here to share. Richard, you're looking at me like, girl, I know your story.
Absolutely. We share a lot of things in common. SAG took care of my hospitalization. And being an advocate, it's been very important to share my story with men because we as men have a very cavalier attitude about our health issues anyway. And to know that breast cancer is not gender specific, that is my main reason to speak out to men. It was 19 years ago, 1993. I was working in Costa Rica, and I'm in the shower, and I'm just going about my business of showering. I felt something that was not right. Well, that's, you know, I'm a bit of a hypochondriac. So when we completed filming, which was about another week or two later, I went back to the motion picture hospital out in Calabasas. My doctor, my general practitioner was there, and then said, you know, would you take a look at this? This is, Richard, come on, it's nothing. But while you're here, let me just stick a needle in there and check it out. So I went home and figured there's nothing going on, and then maybe 2, maybe 3 days later, he called me up. He said, Richard, I need you to come in. We need to talk. We were friends, but not that close. Come in and talk. And the red flag went up. I went in, and he sat me down, and he says, you have cancer. And I went numb. He went on to say, "You have breast cancer." You question my manhood, man. What are you talking about? I said, "Richard, you have breast cancer." And he went on to talk about the procedure we'd have to go through to hopefully eradicate this from your body. Automatic pilot, I'm just, you know, and it hit me that breast cancer, women die from that. That was singularly one of the most devastating moments in my life, thinking that I had something that I could actually die from. Shaft? Come on.
Shut your mouth.
Well, I went through the procedure and mastectomy, the whole 9 yards, chemotherapy. Woo. For years, I couldn't pass by that hospital without getting nauseous. I needed to lose the weight, but not that way. I mean, the chemo was just, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But when I was finally pronounced cancer-free, you are a survivor, was the next biggest moment. And I went about my life. You know, it's interesting because Hollywood does not like sick actors. And I could not admit that I had cancer. Every film or show that you do, you have to have a physical. And I can say this now, I lied each time. I said, no cancer, until I was pronounced cancer-free, and then I came out about it. And I came out in a strange way. I was at a celebrity golf tournament in Wilmington, North Carolina. And the beauty of that tournament is the hospital, they raised money for the hospital, and this year they were raising money for a vehicle that would go out in the community and test people. I said, that's incredible. As a breast cancer survivor, that's it. The room went silent. I said, oh, I've got to talk about this. And I went public with it when People Magazine and Nightline. And the outpouring and the feedback from that told me that I have an opportunity here. You don't get a vote. This is something you have to do. You've got to talk about it, men's health. And the feedback has just been incredible. I shared with the doctor earlier this morning. I was boarding a plane to go to Vancouver, and the flight attendant ran up and grabbed me. I said, ooh. And she said, Mr. Roundtree, you saved my husband's life. I said, really? He said, yes, as a result of reading your article in People, I showed it to him because I noticed something wrong with, I noticed something on his chest. And as a result of him reading that article, he went and got checked, and they caught it early enough, and you saved his life. That's incredible payback. That's my story.
You know, thank you very much, and I have tremendous respect for people who feel an obligation to step out. And so Naz, I want to say thank you. Of course, we want to thank Richard for that. But Naz, I want to start with you. Advocacy is where we'll start before we get into the medicine. You have two survivors of two devastating diseases on either end of this panel. What role does advocacy play in making sure there are more survivors?
So, at the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation, we define advocacy as getting the public engaged and involved in research. I think the role of the advocate is changing, especially for breast cancer. For a long time, we were out there marching and demanding more money for breast cancer research, and we have to continue to do that. But I think women and men have a bigger role now in terms of having a voice in research, demanding better research, and participating in research even before the onset of a disease. And that's what we do, and that's what we promote at the foundation. We think that by mobilizing the public, educating them about research, and really your own personal health information is a treasure chest that we need to help us understand what are causes of breast cancer and ways to prevent it. We've raised a lot of money for breast cancer over the years, and we've done some good research, but we still have 108 women die every day of this disease. And we don't know why, and we don't know how to prevent it. So, and the only way to do that is we need to study women. So as a woman or a man, we need to become advocates of our own bodies. We need to demand research. We need to have a voice in the research that's being done. And we need to keep hold the researchers accountable. Make sure that we're looking into areas of research that have a promise to push us forward into understanding the cause and ways to prevent it.
Dr. Shufelt, when you hear that number, 108 women die of breast cancer, I know you're sitting there thinking, good Lord, if I tell this audience the number that die from heart disease, it would floor people. Why don't you take it from there?
Well, I think advocacy is one thing that has done a tremendous amount in breast cancer front. At the Barbra Streisand Women's Heart Center, we are now trying to ride on that tidal wave to educate women about heart disease. So the numbers are staggering. It's 350,000 women die every year of heart disease. And most importantly, it's approximately 50,000 more women die every year than men. And heart disease since 1982 has been predominantly a majority, more women have died of heart disease. So we have now known this since 1982 and are really chartering the research to determine why that is. And Star, I think that your comments are so important and hit home because a lot has to do with recognizing the symptoms of heart disease. The symptoms of heart disease in women are dramatically different in a woman than it is in a man. And that's what I would like to get the message out, but also how women develop heart disease is different.
Why don't we just start with just some basics so everybody knows. Dr. Holmes, what is cancer and how do you get it?
Well, cancer, whether it's breast cancer or another type of cancer, is a consequence of many things that we experience in our lives that change the way our cells behave. Normally cells multiply to a certain degree, and then they stop because they have a dedicated, defined function. But cancer cells are cells that, because of bad messaging, bad DNA, they continue to multiply. And not only do they multiply, but they also lose respect for their boundaries. So a cell that starts in the breast can move to the lung or to the liver or the bone.
And become aggressive.
And become aggressive, right.
So it can be genetic as well as environmental?
It's multifactorial, so genetics is one component, but then our genes are affected by our environment and about our lifestyle and habits. And so all of these things play a part in what a cell does in its lifespan and whether or not it becomes a cancer cell. So for breast cancer, we know that breast cancer has a significant genetic component, but then there are lifestyle components such as exercise and nutrition, which also are important for heart disease as well. And when you manage those risks, you can reduce the risk of breast cancer. So we know that they play a role in it. But unfortunately, we can't identify specific things you can do to eliminate the possibility of developing breast cancer because there's so many factors that play a role that it's hard to control all of them.
Dr. Shufelt, in contrast with heart disease, you can do some very specific things that limit your risk of heart disease.
So that's exactly right. So there are risk factors for developing heart disease that are well documented in both men and women, and the 5 most common risk factors are, one is a family history. So if you have a family member who's had a heart attack or heart disease below the age of 55, another one is high cholesterol or high blood cholesterol values. Another one is high blood pressure. So having uncontrolled high blood pressure is a risk factor. Obesity is a tremendous risk factor for heart disease, and that plays into the inflammation that's involved, and that crosses over also to cancer. And then finally, unfortunately, this is still an issue in our community as well as the United States, is smoking. So more young women are smoking. More young women than young men are still smoking. So it's critical to address smoking in this population.
Dr. Funk, why don't you come in and talk to us a little bit about the role obesity plays in cancer, breast cancer specifically. It is really the #1 issue that our country faces. And I think it would not be too far for me to step over the line to say, if we could get control of the obesity epidemic, we could help get control over some of the other health issues. Dr. Funk?
That's a brilliant insight, and it's very true. 25% of all breast cancer worldwide is attributed to obesity and a sedentary lifestyle. If we could get that obesity under control, we would eradicate perhaps up to 20–30% of breast cancers. It's a huge number. What is it about obesity? In terms of breast cancer, it all comes down to estrogen production. So people who are overweight have their adrenal glands pump out this thing called androstenedione. Anyway, it gets converted by fat to estrogen. So overweight women have more estrogen, and 75% of all breast cancers are fueled to multiply and grow by estrogen. So we need to lose that weight so that we can get the estrogen under control. Here's a very interesting fact. Okay, if you remember back, especially girls, women, how much did you weigh when you were 18? Star did a big 180 on this one, I'm guessing.
I had to, honey.
And that is, the majority of women gain weight throughout life. So if you think back to 18, or if you know your ideal body weight, get that number in your head. You ready? Plus or minus 8 pounds, you have no increased risk for breast cancer. And frankly, you can leave. We don't like you if you still fit in your skinny jeans. All right. If you
I love you already.
If you've gained 9 to 14 pounds, you just jump breast cancer risk by 25%. 14 to 21 pounds, 60%. And if you have gained over 21 pounds since high school, you just doubled your risk of breast cancer. The good news is if you lose that weight, you'll lose the risk.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a real, you can reverse it.
Oh, this is an exciting study, actually.
I'm really excited now.
Okay, I want to tell you about this one. This one it's steeped in a great study. 33,000 women were followed for 15 years, and they tracked a bunch of things, but of course breast cancer was one of them. And then they picked that out, and they said, all right, now let's compare that to weight. So those women who maintained weight, even if they were overweight, but if they maintained their weight throughout those 15 years, they were our null group, okay? So they had the baseline risk of breast cancer. If you lost weight prior to menopause in those 15 years, your breast cancer dropped in half. If you lost that weight after menopause, it dropped by 35%. So start losing.
So get to moving is the point. So, is it not too? It's not too late. You know. Okay. So not to put him on the spot, but Shaft did not live a sedentary lifestyle. Okay. So I'd like to know what were the risks in that. So we're not talking sedentary lifestyle. We were not talking obese in that situation. Breast cancer can touch your life regardless. It's not just obesity and a sedentary lifestyle. Am I right?
Well, that's true, and that's why that was 25%. So we've got another 75% that is, as Dr. Holmes was saying, multifactorial. We've got a genetic component. I'm sure we'll touch on this, but it is so critical to me that women understand that only 5 to 10% of all breast cancer can be blamed on mom or dad giving you a bad gene. Only 20% of all women with breast cancer have a single relative with breast cancer. The other 80% have a little bit of soul searching to do in terms of what their lifestyle brings to the table.
Got you. Richard, what did your doctor say was the cause of your cancer? Could they even pinpoint it?
Could not pinpoint it because I was obviously asked the question, are there any your parents or what's your, any of your parents have cancer or what have you? And no, with the exception of my dad having prostate cancer very late in life. There was nothing you could point to that looked like it could cause breast cancer. So there was no answer to that.
So it speaks to your point, Dr. Holmes, that sometimes it's multifaceted.
Well, most times it is. Even people who are genetically predisposed to developing breast cancer still have other lifestyle factors that can increase or lower their risk. So as a breast cancer surgeon, what I do on a daily basis is to talk about the treatment of breast cancer and to treat breast cancer. But what I also talk about on a daily basis to my healthy women as well as to my breast cancer survivors is the importance of diet, exercise, and nutrition in order to reduce their risk of developing recurrence and to reduce their risk of developing the #1 cause of death in women, which is heart disease.
So are you really saying to me that there is no magic bullet? Diet, exercise, and proper nutrition is really the only secret.
That's the hard answer. First of all, there's no magic bullet for anything, and the thing that
you're wearing a white coat, you're supposed to have a better answer than
that. It's what hopefully our parents taught us as kids, that have to eat right, we have to exercise, we have to manage our weight, and when we don't, those things manifest themselves in many ways throughout the life. And heart disease, breast cancer are two of the main ways that it does so.
Dr. Shufelt, how do we start to live a healthier lifestyle? I know that the Barbra Streisand Heart Foundation is really working tirelessly in this area.
Tirelessly, I would say, and she's really come to the forefront to let women know how to live that healthy life and what the risk factors are. So the first thing I say is get out and exercise and walk. I also talk to a lot of my patients about buying a pedometer, because you'll be amazed how many steps you can take in a day, or amazed how many little steps you take in a day. And 10,000 steps, 2 miles.
Everybody know what a pedometer is? Okay.
So it's a little device that you wear on your hip, outside of your clothes. It'll count the number of steps that you take. Take the stairs. That's something that we constantly do in the hospital, even though we're on the 7th floor. We take the stairs up and down instead of the elevators. I think educating about diet is important. The Mediterranean diet has been found to be very heart healthy. So make sure that you have 5 servings of fruits, 5 servings of vegetables per day, and a healthy serving of almonds or some type of legumes per week. And then I would also say that educating mothers is going to help the whole family. Educating women is going to help the whole family. This is going to be a trickle-down effect. The whole family is going to start exercising and eating. So I think that's 2 of the critical messages that we get out to our women.
As we approach this whole issue of women's health, I see a lot of overlap. Kristie, is that something that we can take away from this afternoon, that there is a lot of overlap in what we as women especially, and men and women generally, should be doing? I'm sorry.
You bet there's overlap, and the thing to take away then is sort of an exhale, like, oh, I don't have to do these 5 things so I don't get breast cancer, these 6 things so I don't get heart disease. They do overlap, and this, to me, is the critical bottom line. You want to create your body, you want to instill in it the best defense against any disease life wants to throw at you. And to do that is to take some of these recommendations about diet and exercise. I mean, when you were talking about exercise, I was immediately reminded another great breast cancer study, 17,000 women this time. All they had to do was walk for 11 minutes a day, and their breast cancer dropped by 18%. They put a little pep in that step, and you get some vigorous exercise, as is really recommended, 5 days a week, at least 30 minutes, at least break a sweat. 40% drop. But guess what? You're not going to die of heart disease, most likely, because you're getting so fit. I mean, of course, again, multifactorial. You don't get to have one thing like, yes, I exercise, I'm not getting anything. But it all overlaps, so I think the big... And I took the stairs. Apparently, they're like, can you walk in those heels? Because we're taking the stairs up. So I'm not going to die today.
I'm going to, gel it down, because one of my favorite doctors says, eat less and move more. Mm-hmm. And that will help you out. Dennis, am I right?
You're right.
Okay.
That's it.
But fried foods taste so good.
then eat less and walk more.
Birthday only. You know, you got to give yourself some cheat days.
I know, because it's very difficult for me to admit this, but I don't really trust people that don't eat bacon. So you have to help me with some strategies.
I've got to help you out with some scary facts
I
if you
need
want.
some strategies here, over here.
Well, our nutritionist says if it comes from the ground, if it grows from the ground, eat it plentiful. If it has a face, eat it sparingly.
Oh.
And so the idea is to eat, is just, you know, to limit the consumption.
Yes.
I try not to tell people to remove from their diet all the things that give them pleasure, but to limit it and to compensate for that by doing more things that are beneficial.
If it comes from the ground, eat it plentiful. If it has a face, eat it sparingly.
Yes.
Okay. I have to remember that. I'll keep that in mind. We all are going to keep that in mind. What about this whole issue of the income disparity in our country and how it impacts on health? And I'll ask you to start with that, Naz, and then I'll ask the panel to discuss that for me.
Well, I think access to health, especially for African American women and Latino women, has been an issue, and there's a lot of studies coming out in terms of survivorship with breast cancer, and that population having access to the best care, so they can get diagnosed early and they can also get the appropriate treatment. So it's a huge issue in this country, and I think it's something that we need to think about. You know, it's interesting because we a lot of times, especially it's October and it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we're thinking about, certain organizations are in other countries doing breast cancer awareness, and you think we still have a lot of issues in this country. We still need to provide access to care for a lot of women in this country, so we need to continue to invest money here and make sure that every woman has access to getting diagnosed and also getting the appropriate treatment.
Dr. Holmes, you want to get in on this conversation?
Well, I think there are several challenges. One is the challenge of, I'll use the term poverty, to maintaining health, getting proper nutrition. That's a factor. It affects the risk factors in the probability of developing breast cancer. But then there's also the access to early diagnosis and detection. As you know, we recommend screening mammography still at the age of 40 annually, and many women find that they have limited access to that. Now, fortunately, many states, many communities have programs where they allow or accommodate screening for uninsured women, but as you know, we need a much more global solution to improving access to health care for women and men who are uninsured. And I think when that is in place, we'll lower a lot of the barriers that women encounter. But I think the biggest barrier that they have is just that of awareness, the need to know that they are at risk, even if they have no family history, that they still should get screening, even if they don't have symptoms. That's what screening is all about, diagnosing cancer when there's no symptoms present. And what we can do as advocates is to make sure that people understand those things, the importance of wellness, but also early detection and screening, and that they have access to screening even if they're uninsured. You just need to know where to go to get it.
You know, Richard, as I sit here, I think of the stigma that women may face when confronted with breast cancer, the possibility of losing a breast, heart disease, getting a zipper down the center of your chest. But from a man's perspective, it is really an attack on your masculinity. You got breast cancer. How do we avoid sort of embracing those stereotypes and focus really on what matters, which is our ultimate health?
I had to face that. Looking at my chest as concave, I have an inkling of what a woman must feel like losing a part of her body. Not that I was called on to do a lot of love scenes of late, but being naked from the waist up is not something I would look forward to. Now, to your question again.
How do we avoid sort of falling into those stereotypes, sort of making men feel like they're less than men and women feel like they're less than women? I can tell you from personal experience, having a zipper down the center of my chest and having people in the media question what that scar is, and to say things like she should cover it up, when quite frankly, it's a badge of courage for me right now.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be alive without
Absolutely. It took me a while to get to that point, but it is a badge of honor now. And when I talk to my fellow survivors, and we embrace each other as a fellow warrior, and we're just so happy to be here.
Right.
It is a badge of
Because
honor.
the alternative is, you know,
ugly.
I'd much rather have somebody wheel me into the operating theater and wheel me out than wheel me in one of them gold coffins, okay? Here it comes down to that. Kristie, there's a lot of pressure on women to sort of conform to a certain standard of beauty, a certain look, if you will. And I know that the issue of obesity, you know, we're right now hearing we want to encourage people to be who they are. But obesity is so dangerous across all communities. How do you encourage people to be who they are, but still take into account that being overweight can kill you?
That's an excellent question. You tread lightly and gently. But when the doors open with an existing breast cancer patient, and she looks at you and says, what can I do so this doesn't happen again? And I can show her studies that prove that recurrence goes up 50% if you don't lose that weight, and death from this cancer that we are hoping we just beat is 63% higher if you would just lose the weight. And I will help you. So I help put in place some plans for them.
But you do need an open door. You need a dialogue. You need somebody willing to hear what it is you're bringing to them.
Right. When they're in a vulnerable place and they feel like their life is at risk, that's your open door.
Okay. I want to ask some practical questions, and anybody can jump in who has the information. I keep hearing that vitamins are something that we should all be taking. What role do vitamins play in our nutrition? Who wants to take that?
I say that you can get most of your vitamins from a good diet with healthy vegetables and fruits. The concern I have with some of the vitamins is that it's not a regulated industry. The FDA has no oversight of it unless there's a problem, and we recently heard about a problem with something that the FDA didn't have any oversight of. So I try to have my women eat their vitamins through their diet, with an exception, and that would be vitamin D if it's low. It can be checked, and D is a sunshine vitamin, and even though we are in sunny Southern California, the rays that come in from the vitamin D to our skin only actually occur 6 months of the year, and an SPF of 15 will block out 99% of those rays. The other things that you get vitamin D from are really sardines and really fatty foods. So
I thought you just told me we can't have those anymore.
I do say vitamin D. With that exception, I do say that vitamins are regulated by the United States product, so I look for the USP stamp on those vitamins if I do recommend that. More importantly is calcium also for your bones for women, and there's been some concern that calcium supplements actually increase the risk of calcium deposited in the heart blood vessels. So that was 2 studies that were out last year. It's still, the verdict's not out. That was 2 studies. So what I do, actually, I give my women a handout about dairy consumption and calcium, different types of vegetables that have calcium, kale, very leafy foods. And the requirement for bone is 1,200 milligrams after the age of 50.
Dr. Holmes, do you agree? Anything you want to add to that?
I would agree, and I would add that vitamin D is particularly important because low levels of vitamin D has also been associated with increased risk of breast cancer. So it's important for women and men to have their vitamin D levels checked, and if it's low, either to supplement it with the proper diet or to take supplements specifically targeted at elevating the vitamin D level.
I'm going to ask I have this list of questions of things I always wanted to know. What about genetically modified foods? We keep hearing about those foods that have been introduced into our society, and in a lot of families, they find it easier and more accessible. Are they ever good for you, or are we going back to if it comes from the ground, plentiful. If it has a face, sparingly. So genetically modified foods. Kristie, we want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, they're cheap.
Yeah.
Most things cheap aren't that good. It's not a healthy substitute for really focusing on a nutritious, tons of fruits and vegetables, preferably organic if you can afford them and find them, high fiber, low fat, lean meats that aren't smoked, grilled, charred with cancer-causing carcinogens.
Girl, people don't live in those neighborhoods all the time. What are you talking about? I mean, literally, I've been traveling across this country as a heart advocate, and I go to some neighborhoods, and I have to go miles and miles before I can find a store where there's a fresh vegetable anywhere. But, baby, you can get a Michelob Ultra down the block. You can get any beer or Hot Pocket or any of that kind of stuff down the street. So I'm talking about practical solution for a community that is a little less, income than down the block here. What do we do?
At the base level, it's sustenance, it's calories, and if that's where we are, then that's what you need to do. But it's a deep issue, right? It goes it's political, and it's, I hope, a solvable problem, but we also have still people without clean water in our own country. So,
Dennis, I see you want to get in.
Well, I would just say, I mean, the term genetically modified food is, most people accept it as, or experience it as a scary term, and it isn't necessarily a scary term, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the food is deficient in quality. It means that it's been modified in a way so that it can be grown more efficiently and more costly. And so you just have to be somewhat selective about what that is. I think if you have access to genetically modified nutritious food, that is fruits and vegetables, that's better than having excessive amounts of food with eyes or things that will look back at you.
The visual up here is just a bit much for me right now.
So I think that, I'm not saying that all genetically modified foods are good, but they're not all bad either. You just have to make a judgment. And foods that are nutritious and fruits and vegetables in general, when you balance all things equal, are better for you than foods that are not rich in fruits and vegetables, genetically modified or not.
What role do antioxidants play in our diet and in our nutrition right now? Because everywhere you read we need to introduce antioxidants into our diet.
It's a huge role. One of the hottest theories that's proving to be pretty true is that the body's creating a solid foundation of inflammation and stress. And that is a very hospitable environment for cancer cells. And antioxidants are the antithesis of that. They fight inflammation, and they improve immune function, and they help healthy cells overcome those that are not healthy. So Dr. Holmes in the beginning said basically a cancer cell is one that morphs, it grows without control or order. Well, it only can do that if there aren't a bunch of antioxidants around to calm it down. So it's incredibly important to add them to your diet, but how? It gets really confusing. What is an antioxidant? Is there a jar of antioxidant? It's superfoods, and it's something that I actually have been paying attention to, because just even personally, how do I get that stuff in my body every day? Because maybe I don't have time for a kale salad, or I'm not going to make one, or where I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I'm just eating Michelob, So what do you do? I actually have a very practical answer. It's not going to apply to a lot of people, but I've created in my routine a smoothie that I make every single morning, and I throw tons of putrid stuff in there that tastes delicious because it's all camouflaged by a bunch of berries and juice. And it's actually on our website, the Pink Lotus Breast Center, pinklotusbreastcenter.com. We have a breast cancer 101 section with a bunch of information. It's right now at the top. I stole it from Michael Zen, who wrote a book.
Does it cost a lot of money, the stuff that's in the...
It does. I buy it all, and it'll last 3 months, but you got to buy it again. So it's not a practical solution.
Is there anything that we can do that... I know kale doesn't cost a lot of money. I know that beans don't cost a lot of money. Are those solutions that will work? I see you Dr. about ready to get in there for me.
Well, and fresh fish and will also lower that, and that's through the oils that will decrease antioxidants. The other thing I'll say is not just diet will lower oxidative stress in our body, and that's what we're talking about. An antioxidant will combat the oxidative stress, which is the underlying inflammation for the root of most diseases. So exercise. Exercise, think of it like a medication. It's just 30 minutes a day. That's your oxygen. You're getting oxygen, antioxidant. So that'll also decrease inflammation. So not just through diet, but also through exercise.
Dr. Shufelt, I can tell you, I had a checkup with the endocrinologist, and getting my cholesterol numbers were a joy this time because I introduced some pretty intense cardio into my everyday routine. I am a big spinner. I like to go to spin class, and giving myself that 45 minutes on a SoulCycle bike has significantly lowered my cholesterol, and I was told that it is the one thing that you can do to lower your cholesterol without having to take any additional substances in your body is really getting that exercise.
That's exactly right. I was just seeing a patient this morning, and she dropped her bad cholesterol from 130 to 52. That is on no medication, and she not only feels great, her spirit is good, her emotional, she's very peppy, she feels fantastic, and she got the reward through the bad cholesterol that dropped. So LDL, L is for lousy, H is for healthy. So you've got your LDL and your HDL, and our goal is to drop the LDL for heart disease risk below 100. And for women, we want the HDL above 55. For men, it's above 45 for HDL. And then the other part of the cholesterol panel that will change with exercise is triglycerides. So triglycerides are the instant fat that go into the bloodstream, and we want that less than 160, ideally less than 130. That can all be dropped through diet and exercise. So that's commendable. And triglycerides are also, if anybody's seen that movie where they ate a Big Mac or a hamburger and took the blood right after, it's that thin layer of film. That's triglycerides. And that's proving to be an important risk factor for women in heart disease because that can lay down in the blood vessels.
Naz, have you seen research that actually can tell the gender differences in diagnosing and preventing diseases? Are you all looking at that?
Well, I think we just launched a project October 1st. It's an online study. We're going to follow women and men over time to predict new risk factors for breast cancer. And this is, you sign up online, it's pretty simple, and we start collecting your personal health information through short questionnaires over time. So the goal is to have a robust database of women and men and have all their health information so we can look at potential new risk factors, how, in terms of disparities, long-term survivorship after diagnosis, side effects of treatment, and both for women and men. And we have 20,000 people that have signed up over the past 2 weeks and submitted their health information to us.
Good.
So going back to the advocacy conversation that we started off with, that's what we need to do. And we keep talking about what can we do to reduce our risk of breast cancer, what are the causes of breast cancer. There's some information that we have, but we still need to do more when you have so many women dying of this disease every day. And so really participating in research, submitting your health data when you're healthy, and for us to follow you over time and see what is that point of diagnosis, what is going on, is really important.
Dr. Holmes?
Yes, I think that's a great concept. I do want to make it clear that there are actually resources that are available today that can be used for assessment of risk. That you probably have heard of things like the Gale risk model, but there are other risk models as well. They are tools that an individual woman can use, and these are female specific, what an individual woman can use to estimate her lifetime risk of breast cancer. And it takes in consideration your menstrual history, your age, your family history, prior breast biopsies, those kinds of things, as well as additional information. What's really important is that many women overestimate their risk of breast cancer, and many women underestimate their risk of breast cancer. And it's really important to know what your risk is in order to determine how best you should be screened. If you were to use one of these calculators and determine that your risk is average, which means that it's less than a 15% lifetime risk of breast cancer, then my recommendation, or the American Cancer Society's recommendation for annual screening mammography is appropriate. But if you're high risk, say if your risk is greater than 20% in your lifetime, then annual screening mammography starting at the age of 40 is not the answer for you. It should be mammography starting at the age of 30, MRI every year starting at the age of 30, a much more intensive screening program for a high-risk woman.
How do you get your insurance to agree to pay for the 30 rather than the 40 or the 45? Because that's a real practical question for most of us every day.
Right, so it is a challenge, but so if you are insured, obviously it's a lot easier. You have to have a risk assessment performed by providers such as Dr. Funk or myself, or a genetic counselor or some professional, and then that person has to advocate for you. So part of this is about advocating for yourself, but also pairing up with someone who can advocate for you.
So Richard found something that made him a little uncomfortable, and he went to his doctor.
Yes.
So that's step one, is you have to be your own advocate first of all. You have to check yourself. Does self-examination really work?
Well, but much more important than that, for most women, is that we want them to be engaged before they ever develop a symptom.
Got it.
So waiting until you develop a symptom is much later than you should start. It's really saying, I feel perfectly healthy now, let me see what my risk is, and then determine if you're high risk, that you need to take a more intensive approach to screening and risk reduction. Because if you're high risk, you're going to be much more motivated to do the things we've talked about than if you're average risk. But you should do those things anyway, even if you're average risk.
So risk assessment, being diligent about your own health and noticing any changes in your body. And then when you get into a situation where you are talking to a healthcare provider, don't you have to sort of know what to ask? Because a lot of us don't know what to ask.
So now, I hate to do these plugs, but I'm going to do it because I think my role in advocacy is to make sure that women
We're
have...
actors, we plug all the time.
Okay, well, here we go.
That's what we do.
I want to make sure, my commitment to advocacy is to make sure that women have information that they need before they need it.
Yes.
And so I have a website, as many of us do, and it's drholmesmd.com, drholmesmd.com. And on the website, under resources, I have a presentation that I just uploaded yesterday. I just presented it yesterday. It's called 6 Things You Should Know About Breast Cancer. And it talks about a number of things, and one of those things is about the importance of risk assessment. And the purpose is really to not only let women know what they should know, but to almost use that as their marching orders, to go into their doctor's office and say, you know, I just figured out my risk is 20%. This document says, Dr. Holmes says, you can use my name, that these are the things that I should do. And they're not really my opinion, they're things that are nationally accepted guidelines for managing women at high risk. They're not, these are what everyone should be doing. The problem is that most of us just don't know it. So we really have to be our own advocates. You just can't rely upon us to give you the right information. We need people to be empowered to seek that information and to use it.
So now, Richard, when you went to your doctor, you didn't know what you were going to find out, and I suspect you didn't want to hear anything that was bad news.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, because you know where I'm going with this, that especially with men, to get a man to go to a doctor, you have to actually wear extra lingerie or something, because guys don't want to go to the doctor. Once you get into the doctor, you're grunting and don't want to ask the right questions. And once you ask the right questions, you don't even want to hear the answers.
Well, I said a little earlier, I'm a bit of a hypochondriac. So I want to know what's going on with my body.
Very good.
And I've always been that way. And that was a nice little blessing. When I discovered that little nodule, if you will, I knew that it wasn't right. It wasn't a pimple, I wanted to know what it was. And he poo-pooed it initially. He said, "Oh, Richard, come on, this is nothing." Whew. But while you're here.
Yeah. So your doctor was an advocate also. I mean, so it's really sort of a joint teamwork, that the patient has to be their own advocate, and you have to be with a healthcare provider who will advocate for you. Dr. Holmes identified, Dr. Shufelt, the sort of list that make up the risk factors for cancer and breast cancer specific. Is there a list of things for women to look towards as a risk factor for heart disease? Do you have a website, in other words, so we can go to that?
The Barbra Streisand Women's Heart Center has a website that lists risk factors. But I want to point out a few. I mentioned the 5 main that cross over between our risk factors for both men and women. Now, what is making more women die of heart disease than men every year? There are risk factors that we are learning that are specific to women. And one happens to be what happens during pregnancy is an important risk factor for what happens to your future risk for heart disease. This is new. This is last year's guidelines for the American Heart Association, prevention now of heart disease in women. So if you developed high blood pressure during pregnancy, if you developed what we call toxemia or preeclampsia that required a baby to be delivered, we used to think these things were just happened during pregnancy, and afterwards the baby was born and it cured it. But actually, pregnancy is it's a 10-month-long stress test. I'm going through it. So I would say that pay attention and have your providers. We ask every single woman in our clinics what happened during pregnancy. Another one is gestational diabetes, type 2 diabetes, puts women at risk for developing diabetes in the future. That's also a risk factor for heart disease. So those are important in addition to the traditional risk factors. Now, we have a long way to go. Men and women are different when it comes to risk factors, and that's what we're studying now at the Barbra Streisand Women's Heart Center.
Let me also plug heart.org, which is the American Heart Association's website that has the excellent resources for every question you want to have. And you also have some very specific things in your areas. So if you go to heart.org, you will be able to sort of plug in what your question is. And then get those lists and those risk factors. Let's talk, we've been talking nutrition, we've talked exercise. I sort of want to talk diagnosis and then treatment. We're going to start in the breast cancer area, and then we'll go to heart disease so that everybody can be very clear on it. The last thing, Dr. Holmes, women and men want to hear is with breast cancer that it's going to necessitate chemotherapy, radiation, or mastectomy. When do you make those determinations? How do you make those determinations? And where does the state of the science stand at this point?
So the treatment of breast cancer largely depends upon its stage, and we have from stage 0 to 4. Higher stage means more aggressive, lower stage means less aggressive. And what that means is for patients with stage 2, 3, or 4 breast cancers, we usually recommend chemotherapy. But for all patients, there's often a milder form of medication, what we consider a milder form called endocrine therapy. So if they have an estrogen-sensitive cancer, we can give them a pill that they would take daily for 5 years, and there are relatively few symptoms associated with that. Now, in terms of, that's kind of the systemic treatment, but the role that the surgeon plays in the treatment of breast cancer is to determine if mastectomy or lumpectomy is the appropriate way to go. Lumpectomy means that just a portion of the breast is removed, the portion that retains the cancer. Mastectomy means that the entire breast is removed. And there are variations on doing mastectomies. It could be nipple-sparing or skin-sparing mastectomy. But it largely depends upon, number one, the size of the cancer compared to the size of the breast. If it's a large cancer in a small breast, that more likely will require mastectomy. If it's a small cancer, you have many options. And then there's a matter of choice. Some women decide that even though the cancer is small, they feel emotionally that they would rather have a mastectomy instead of having a lumpectomy. One requirement when you treat with lumpectomy is that we have a need to deliver radiation, because radiation reduces the risk of recurrence within the breast if someone opts for lumpectomy. The traditional way that we give radiation therapy is a 30-day treatment over a course of 6 weeks, although many of us are now using this approach called intraoperative radiotherapy, where we can reduce that 30-day treatment to a 30-minute treatment given during surgery, entirely during surgery. It's called intraoperative radiotherapy. I've been involved in developing that technology for about 8 years. And
that would also reduce the risk of the damage to the aorta, which is something that I experienced because I had a thymectomy at 19 years old, and I had to have an 8-week series of radiation. We found that there was damage, and it sort of made the aorta a little crystallized. Am I saying it correct, Dr. Shufelt? I think I'm
calcified.
right.
So we
Yes,
are learning,
calcified.
yeah,
Thank
calcified.
you.
And we're learning in our clinic, and Cedars-Sinai at the Women's Heart Center, we just opened up a cardio-oncology clinic because more cancer survivors are surviving, which is excellent. But their treatments that they went through are putting them at risk for developing future heart disease, and we want to identify this early. So just like the radiation is treatment, it doesn't just stop at the breast plate. It goes through to the heart, and that's what we ask as well. And some chemotherapies, especially the older chemotherapies, have had some changes that we've seen on the blood vessels as well. So
Go ahead, Dr. Holmes. I wanted to make sure you finish.
Just want to add that when we use intraoperative radiotherapy, we can actually place a shield in the breast to prevent the radiation from entering the chest, because we know that over many years, say 10 to 15 years after receiving radiation of the breast, using the traditional way of giving radiation, that those women have an increased risk of, very small, but still significant increased risk of lung cancer on that side, as well as heart disease, particularly if the cancer is given to treat, the radiation is given to treat a left-sided cancer. There's one other thing I just want to mention briefly, because I didn't know about the rest of your treatment. You said that you had the thymectomy, but
We
also...
both got worried for you right now. We both just got a little worried about you right now.
In terms of the heart?
The
Of
radiation that
breast
you
cancer.
received after
Yes,
the...
8 weeks.
8 weeks. How old were you? If you don't
19.
mind. Okay.
19.
So this is important information because there are well-established guidelines that say that a woman diagnosed with cancer and treated with radiation of the chest between the age of 10 and 30 has an increased lifetime risk of breast cancer, and by virtue of that alone, should undergo mammography starting at the age of 30 and breast MRI starting at the age of 30 annually.
The best part was it was a thymectomy that the thymoma was completely benign.
Yes.
The number 2 was I did start mammography at 30 years old.
Thank you.
So I've
So she's
always
on it.
been able
She's
to
on
do
it.
that. Yes, that I've always been able to do.
But that's a really important piece of
Absolutely.
information that others need to hear, because just 2 months ago, I saw a 33-year-old who had Hodgkin's lymphoma, irradiated at the age of 14, and she developed breast cancer at 33, that perhaps could have been prevented had we been aware of it and had she been screened, you know,
It really comes down to, you know, it's probably the reason that I am an advocate, because I've been so blessed to have access to resources and insurance that has helped me. I mean, I've been obviously in the media industry for 20 years now, and our union has been there for me in terms of my health care. I've never not had adequate health insurance. So I know this is not the forum to talk about health insurance, but just I'm a living, breathing example of what health insurance can do for you, whether or not you live or die. And it's a sad commentary on our country that we even have to deal with that. Richard, I was actually going to ask you to share, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the two of us are here, in hope that our experience enhances someone else's life or just triggers something for them. You touched on it when you first shared your story. Chemotherapy was rough. And we've now talked a little bit about the results of some radiation. How did you get through chemotherapy emotionally? And physically, I know that it takes a toll, but emotionally, it has to take a toll.
what I find interesting, there's been so many advances since I went through my mastectomy. But the chemo, it was devastating, and I don't, you just get through it as best you can. And I knew that I was going to be down for the count for 4 days, and could not eat. But when I was looking at my body and seeing how much weight I was losing, I said, yeah, there's some upside to this. But physically, it was devastating. And as I said earlier, I couldn't even drive past that hospital without getting nauseous.
What was the
for years?
What was the recovery afterwards? I'll share in a minute my recovery, but for you afterwards, after the chemo is done, after the mastectomy is done, what did you have to do to make sure that there's no recurrence? Make sure that you're living a healthy lifestyle.
Well, I was, besides the cancer, I was pretty healthy, you know, going in. I didn't change anything I was doing. My exercise level was the same. I couldn't play golf for quite a while because I couldn't swing, you know, I lost feeling and muscle in that side of my body. I think mainly what it did, I became really cognizant of what I was putting in my body, which was the biggest change. Stuff that came out of the ground, I started to appreciate it a little more.
In the ground, plentiful, with a face
I will
sparingly.
never forget that.
You know you messed me up with that, okay?
Me as well.
Guilty.
Dr. Shufelt, I wanted to share with the group that I did 3 months of cardiac rehab.
Excellent.
Which you know that's my big advocacy, is cardiac rehab. The numbers of people in our country who suffer from heart disease and ultimately who will have an incident are staggering, but you can get through it. And I obviously came through it. But 3 months of intense cardiac rehab where, I mean, it would take me literally 40 minutes to get up to go to the bathroom and then back to my bed that first week out of the hospital. And then I needed to sleep for 8 hours because I was exhausted. To start off being able to walk the treadmill 1 foot in front of the other for 5 minutes, to then move to the point where I can do 60 minutes on a spin bike is unbelievable to me. And the only thing that gave me the confidence to do that was cardiac rehab, because I really felt like if I walked down the street and tripped, that my chest would break and my heart would fall out. I had to talk to the physical therapist to help me get through that emotional connection to the surgery. And to the point where I had her hold my arm. I felt like a little old lady walking down the street in New York during that part of the physical therapy, because I kept thinking, if I fall, if I fall, if I fall. And finally, my physical therapist was abusive, okay? Because she turned to me and she said, you're 48 years old. How many times have you spontaneously fallen in the middle of the street? And I had to admit that it had never happened before. She said, so get over it. You're not going to fall in the middle of the street. So let my arm go and walk down the street. And it was as if a light bulb went off in my head. But you need cardiac rehab in order to feel confident again.
And cardiac rehab is a monitored exercise program in a hospital setting. So you're wearing an EKG monitor the whole time, and it's physician supervised. And that's one of the hats that I wear at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in the Heart Institute. And what I'll say is that women are generally under-referred to cardiac rehab, but in general, everyone is under-referred. It's one of our get with the guidelines, meaning that these are guidelines nationally set by the American Heart Association that say once you're discharged from the hospital, you need to be on an aspirin. You need to be on a blood pressure medication. You may need to be on a cholesterol medication. And guess what? If you've had heart surgery, open heart surgery, a valve replacement, bypass surgery, and angioplasty, which is a stent being placed, or even if you have chest pain that will not go away to medical management, cardiac rehab is covered by most insurances, and that's set by Medicare guidelines. And it's 3 months, and it's intense.
And it was completely covered. Again, it was completely covered.
And
It was intense. Worth it, though.
It is definitely
worth it.
And it gives you back that confidence because it's that safety net that you're wearing that exercise monitor. So if something goes wrong, usually I'll know about it before the patient does. So
I'm so proud. I only have the aspirin regimen and the metoprolol. That's it. I mean, this is 2 years after open heart surgery.
Well, a lot of that's attributed to your weight loss too and your exercise.
Because you're 300 pounds, getting your heart taken out is a little difficult.
It's excellent.
So, I mean, that losing the weight is the thing. Losing the weight was the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing for everything that we've been discussing today. So I heard what the treatment plan is for breast cancer. The treatment plan after heart surgery, we know cardiac rehab. If you could give one piece of advice, I'm going to open it up to the audience so that you all can ask some questions, and then I can take some questions from our live stream guests. But if you could impart one bit of information to this group, to that group, the bigger group, about women's health and health in general, so that we could live a healthier lifestyle, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Dr. Holmes.
Well, I'm going to narrate breast
Yes.
cancer a little bit.
Absolutely.
So I like to think of breast cancer slightly differently than most. First of all, I think only 1 out of 8 women in her lifetime will develop breast cancer. Only 1. And only 1 out of 36 women will die of breast cancer. So even though it's a very frightful concept, it actually isn't as prevalent as most people fear. But those numbers are not a matter of chance. It's a matter of participation. And it really comes down to making sure that you're diagnosed early and that you, if you're unfortunate enough to be diagnosed, but that you also do things to reduce the chances of developing breast cancer. It's a participatory activity. And there are things you can do. It's not just sitting and waiting for things to happen.
Right.
A lot of the things you've heard about today, nutrition, exercise, weight management, are things that you can do to reduce the risk of developing breast cancer. And if you develop breast cancer, reduce the risk of dying from breast cancer. But you also have to be active in making sure that you're getting screened based upon your individual risk level and that you're diagnosed early so that you can live that expected 20, 30, 40 years after the diagnosis of breast cancer, because that's likely what's going to happen if you're diagnosed early.
Good information. Dr. Funk?
Holmes, man, you took everything. You just went on and on and on and took every point. I got nothing left to say about breast cancer, so I'm going to be general.
You can re-emphasize
and
it.
you
It's
said
important.
it so beautifully
Not for
and
nothing,
eloquently.
if you say it twice, it's all right, because we all need to hear it.
Well, I will say it twice in a little version, and that is the 2 biggest risk factors for getting breast cancer, besides having a genetic mutation that we can test for called BRCA, are being a woman and getting older. So there's nothing you can do about those 2 things. So like Dr. Holmes said,
You can fight it every step of the way.
focus on those things you can do something about. Don't drink too much alcohol. Don't be fat. Start exercising. Get those antioxidants. Get that mammogram. Figure out your risk. Get the MRI. But here's one that I think is underemphasized. Stop stressing. Get happy about who you are, where you're going, and immerse yourself in a plan to be happy and don't have so much stress, because that creates that hostile environment inside your body that other people don't want to be your friend, and cancer cells do.
Great piece of advice. Naz, help us with a little insight.
So I'm going to talk from the advocacy and how to support the cause.
Yes, ma'am.
So be it October and Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I think it's important that if you decide to make a donation to a breast cancer organization, that you really research and believe in the mission of that organization. You know, we do have a lot of awareness about breast cancer. I think there's not one person in this audience that doesn't know what the disease is. So think about action, how to become active in the field. Take care of yourself, be aware of your body, have a conversation with your doctor, but also, even before the onset of a disease, think about ways that you can participate in research, donate your data, and make a donation, support the cause. But I think when it comes to the donation piece and breast cancer, it's a busy landscape. There's a lot of organizations. Research the organization that you want to support. Really figure out what are they doing? How are they making a difference with the money that I'm giving them? And I think that's critical.
From a lawyer's perspective, let me also share, you always want to know what percentage of the dollar is going to actual services versus going to administration, and you can always do that research. And if it's not at least 80 cents, then find another organization to give the money to.
And we're at 85 cents at the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation. But that's exactly it. And there's plenty of places that you can go online and do that research.
All right. Yes, doctor?
So I would say advocacy for women's health. So women's heart disease and breast cancer, and get involved in research as a healthy participant or as a participant and find out the studies that are going on. That is critical for us making that next step in really reversing this and turning this boat around and really dropping the numbers so that the numbers are declining in women with heart disease. So finally, what I'll say is know your numbers. Know your risk factor numbers. Go to the American Heart Association website, heart.org, or go to Barbra Streisand Women's Heart Center website and know your numbers. Know your cholesterol. Know what your blood pressure is. Know what your body mass index is, or your weight, and take into account your height. And know how much you're exercising every week, and have this discussion and go into your healthcare provider and ask about your numbers. They'll not only help you for heart disease, but they'll help you prevent breast cancers too. So I would say that.
Thank you very much. And Richard?
I would say the same thing you just mentioned goes for men as well. Just staying on top of your health. I mean, as men, we take better care of our automobiles than we do our own body. So knowing what's going on in your body is very important, and that necessitates getting your checkups. I don't know about what ages and all of that, but it is very important that you stay on top of what's going on inside of your body. And early detection, as I always say, early detection can save your life. Stay on top of those PSA numbers as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much to our panel. I have a bunch of questions from the audience that I'm going to just throw out to the panel. Before I do that, I will just add my 2 cents, if you don't mind. I would love to suggest that you have a good relationship with your primary physician. Establish that that doctor is an advocate for you as much as you're an advocate for yourself. For me, when I told you the story about going into the cardiologist, I'm very lucky in that the cardiologist, he treats me like his daughter. He happens to be the greatest cardiologist in the world, Dr. Valentin Fuster, and I mean, if you gotta have a dad who's a cardiologist, that's the one to have. But he lets me talk to him, he lets me ask him questions. And having a relationship with a doctor, I think, saved my life. Feeling confident enough to put my life in his hands and to ask him even the tough questions that I was afraid to know the answers to. I believe that I am ultimately my own health advocate, and especially as it relates to African American women, if we are not our own health advocate, we will go into the ground quicker. We are not more likely to get breast cancer, we're more likely to die from it though, because of the lack of relationship with a physician, a lack of preventative medicine, lack of early screening, lack of access to resources. But we can do certain things, especially African American women. We have a better relationship with our hairstylists than we do with our doctors. So the focus really has to return to our own individual health. That's my piece of advice. All right, now we go into some of your questions. I actually love this, and I can't believe that we missed it. The mind and body connection to health with stress and spirituality. And this comes from the Reverend Dr. Louise Diana. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that because actually, Dr. Funk, you touched on it, stress. But the mind-body connection is absolutely imperative. Am I right?
You bet you're right. And it's very poorly understood. But we hold stress will manifest itself in some direction inside your body. And if you already have, people have heard that here theory, we all have cancer in our bodies. It's just a question of whether or not it's going to take root and grow and manifest in your lifetime to make you stop and have to treat it or, unfortunately, take your life. And that may be very true, and the key may be the mind-body connection. And the less balance you have in your life, the more opportunity these cells, these diseases, whether it's heart plaques and arteries or wild cells that want to take you over, you give them that open door. It's poorly researched from, a scientific and physiologic aspect. Mm-hmm. However, you can monitor inflammation. And people who seem to have more of a connection with their bodies and really just more of a connection with the world in their communities, who have a reason to wake up and live, who feel loved and give love, these people have less inflammation in their bodies.
And Dr. Shufelt, I know that reducing the stress reduces the instances of heart disease.
And that's something we focus on not only after heart disease and cardiac rehab with heart rate variability, but stress plays a role in how our blood pressure goes up and how our heart rate varies. So we would like the heart rate to stay nice and steady, but when you get stressed, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, and all this can contribute to the internal pressures in the heart itself. So I think that's an important question. I also ask about spirituality and meditation or some type of self-identification that you have that can bring your stress level down. I think that's important, and I think that also mirrors exercise. Some people use that as their form of spirituality or stress reduction or in combination, and I think that plays an important role for heart health.
I can share something that was very interesting to me, and I've told a few people this. My family loved it more than anything. I had a really gifted and talented heart surgeon, very different than my cardiologist. But on the way into the operating theater, he took my hand because he knew that my faith played a big, important part, and he prayed with me. And I thought that it gave me such a sense of peace going in. So I know for a fact that taking the stress out and bringing your own sense of spirituality in really did alleviate a lot of just the fear that I had going in for heart surgery. Do we place enough emphasis on the things that are not manifested in a pill bottle or in nutrition? Just having a connection to the world around us and to a higher being. Is that a fair question?
I'll share something with you that I don't normally share. My dad, being at that point in time, was a preacher, and I'd seen him do some miraculous things. And as soon as I got home from that initial diagnosis, I called him up and said, "Hey, Dad, And he said to me, "It's done. Let the doctors do what they're going to do, but it's handled." And just him saying that gave me such comfort that I knew I was going to be okay. And that's the spirituality that I knew my dad had some special connections, so it was all good.
Yeah. I find it interesting that the two survivors can share that you found perfect peace, almost.
Absolutely.
And we're here, so clearly at least we know one thing worked. Okay, one thing worked. Well, you know, there's some practical questions here, and this one really impacts on a lot of us. Lily asks, in regards to health care, been unemployed for a year, and you know you only get insurance from employment. She doesn't want to go to a doctor and find out that she needs more medical care when she can't afford it. What do you suggest that a person do who is in that position? And I venture to guess it's a significant number of people in our country. Dr. Holmes?
Well, I can address a portion of it, which is that for women who are of screening age, that is, if they're average risk and they're age 40 or over, that there are programs that allow for screening. I'm sorry.
You're saying some good stuff.
Okay. So for
He's
women,
so comfortable, he thinks he's just having a conversation with me.
So the question is, what are the options in this case for breast screening and evaluation for uninsured women, and how does that affect the options for health care? There are state-funded programs that allow for screening for breast cancer starting at the age of 40, and screening for cervical cancer starting at the age of 25.
Okay.
And you can qualify for that if you have a certain income level, if you're within 200% of the poverty level, which, you know, no one aspires to be that, but some people are. But if they qualify, if they are screened and diagnosed with either of those cancers, then they will qualify for Medi-Cal program in the state of California. Other states have their programs. And at least in the state of California, that program covers all health care within 18 months of the diagnosis.
So it triggers you being able to get more access.
Yes, so whether it's cardiac or breast, whatever your general health care. So you qualify for the Medi-Cal program in California. Other states have their Medicaid version of that. So it does open doors. It's not the solution, the final solution, because of course that's 18 months in this state, but it's a way to get in. So it's important to understand that, because many people may look at the situation, I'm uninsured, if I get diagnosed with breast cancer, what can I do about it? How will I pay for it? I'm just going to end up having some unfortunate outcome. And really, it's really an opportunity that there are programs that will allow me to be screened and diagnosed early and treated so I can then go on to live a full life.
Right, and you want to, if you get diagnosed early and you're at stage 1, 9 times out of 10, 18 months, you will not be at stage 4.
Right, if you're diagnosed at stage 1, you can more than likely expect to be around talking about breast cancer 25 years later.
And that's what we want.
And that's what we want.
That's what we want. There are a couple of practical questions. New York viewer has a question. She has taken fish oil to lower her triglycerides from 300 to 101. What is your opinion on that? Dr. Shufelt, you started to talk a little bit about fish oils earlier.
So fish oil is an effective way to lower triglycerides. However, I prescribe fish oils. There's a prescription grade strength fish oil, and that's been what's shown to be effective for lowering triglycerides. So that's something to talk to your doctor about, whether it be your primary care doctor or your cardiologist. Exercise is another way, and diet is another way to lower triglycerides, but sometimes within the 300s you do need additional help with the fish oils. That's just one medication or modality to lower triglycerides. There are other ones that your healthcare provider could talk to you about. And then I would also say look at the other numbers as well.
I found out, there's a question here, do experts on a panel work with dietitians? And for some reason, I found out that nutrition is not a part of all medical training now. I was shocked when I found that out last week. I did another health panel and learned that piece of information. You would think that the nutrition and diet would work hand in hand with whatever our medical experts were doing. Kristie, what's that about?
We need to revamp the way medical students are trained. But in our center at Pink Lotus, we have a nutritionist on site. We have a geneticist, a psychologist, physical therapist, and we do Chinese medicine. Now, if we look at that list, which is our version of cardiac recovery, it's our cancer recovery that we surround you with. But here's the unfortunate thing. Of that whole list, The genetics, risk assessment, and consultation with the geneticist is covered by insurance. Everything else that is going to help nurture that mind, spirit, body, nutrition, spirit connection, there's no coverage for it. So it's a cash service. I wish we could offer it for free. We're working. We've got our nonprofit too. We've got things in place. But for now, what do you do?
The dietitian is not even covered?
Nope.
There's certain cardiac diagnoses that it's covered, such as cholesterol or type 2 diabetes or blood sugar is covered.
But not just, I'm a little overweight and I want to reduce my breast cancer recurrence risk. There's no code that they will honor.
So what some of us do, and what I do as much as I talk about breast cancer with my patients, is exercise and nutrition. Mm-hmm. In fact, some would rather I talk about it less because they just want to focus on the problem that brought them there today. But I'm trying to think of sort of the long term, not just the short term crisis, which is what most people are dealing with, and the fact that I expect that you will be a survivor of breast cancer. I can't say that you will be a survivor, long-term survivor of cardiac disease, and this is how you can start improving your cardiac risks. So we have to, for those of us who are very interested in it, have to spend the time as part of our normal consultation advocating for the patient to make sure that they're attentive to those long-term healthcare needs.
Got it. Okay, wait, here's one. This is from Michael Tiamo, who wants to ask a question of our heart doctor. Can you have low cholesterol and still be at risk for heart disease because of inflammation within the arteries? And is there a test that can help find early stages of inflammation?
So certainly, I mentioned the 5 risk factors. Cholesterol is just only one of the 5. So I attribute cholesterol to be about 20% of the risk. So certainly people can have normal cholesterol values and then have other processes or inflammation going on, whether that be it from obesity or sedentary lifestyle or family history. That could be a risk factor as well. There are some blood tests that can measure inflammation, but we're not using them as guidelines yet. But they can give you a marker. There was one study of approximately 40,000 people that had an elevation in this inflammation marker called a C-reactive protein, and that level was elevated, but they had normal cholesterol values, and they stopped the trial a little early because those that were randomized to a cholesterol-lowering medication, they lowered their inflammation marker. Now all these people had normal cholesterol values. Versus the placebo. They lowered their risk for heart disease, all-cause mortality, so all-cause death, and I believe even cancers by 40%. So certainly inflammation is that root that we're looking at. But I would say discuss that with your healthcare provider if that's appropriate for you. But again, going back to what we've discussed on the panel for everything is diet and exercise. That can lower inflammation.
Next question. What about toxins as it relates to breast cancer? Like the toxins in our food or in our or the pesticides, how do they affect breast cancer? I'm not even sure either one.
Well, it's unfortunately there's a lack of clear data on specific environmental toxins that can increase the risk of breast cancer. We do have a sense that the excessive use of estrogen and farm animals and it does increase lifetime exposure to estrogen, which may increase the risk of breast cancer.
Meaning chickens that stay up all night long because they shoot them full of stuff?
Well, or cows or pigs or things that are plumper and because they've been supplemented with estrogen. That's
and
not
8-year-old
natural.
little girls all of a sudden having breasts like mine?
Exactly. We see early onset of menstruation at early age because of that kind of environment. So we have a sense that that's a factor, and so that may be one reason to consider organic meats if you can access them, or for them. But beyond that, we know that exposure to toxins is one of the many factors that contributes like all the others. And so I tell the women when I say you should eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day to make sure you wash them well, because some of them carry pesticides, and we don't know what role those pesticides may play, but I doubt that it's beneficial. So we want to make sure that at least as you're having more and more of the foods that come from the land, that you wash off the toxins that may come with them.
Go ahead, Naz.
And this is an area that, like you said, I mean, we need a lot more research. So, and this is one of the projects that we're working on to, through the Health of Women study that we're doing, following women over time and looking at occupational hazard, personal care products, and other exposures to toxins. But there needs to be a lot more research in this area, and a lot of information comes out using plastic bottles, and you know, your makeup or lipstick might cause breast cancer. We just don't have enough data.
I have a question here about deodorant. Does deodorant?
No,
Please wear it.
data. Yes, exactly. Please.
It's no harm.
You can do more harm if you don't.
But you can. But we encourage you not to wear it when you come in for your mammograms. Okay. Otherwise, please wear it.
Otherwise, I have a secret, use it, okay? Basically. All right, here are a couple of questions about 3 diseases that we really didn't talk about, but that are absolutely ones that matter because they make up the next causes of death. What is diabetes? What about high blood pressure and stroke? Why don't we start with the diabetes question?
So diabetes is an elevation of blood sugar in your body where your cells should shuttle the blood sugar into the cell to utilize it for energy. There, it becomes somewhat resistant. It's like the glucose, which is the blood sugar, is trying to ring the doorbell of these cells, trying to get in, trying to knock on the door, and the cells aren't letting the blood sugar in to utilize it for energy. So one of the first symptoms is people can kind of feel sluggish because they're not utilizing their energy fuels. But the other problem is that this blood sugar then stays in the bloodstream. And blood sugar molecules are big. And they travel around the bloodstream, and they can do some tremendous amount of inflammation to the blood vessels itself. So that's what diabetes is. There's 2 types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Type 2 is more commonly known as adult onset, usually from diet, and type 1 is where our body stops making insulin. And insulin is kind of the doorbell. It's kind of the guy that'll let you in that cell. So your insulin is not, you don't make the appropriate amount of insulin. And type 2 diabetes, you can take medications, and insulin as well would be one of them to lower it.
Okay. This is for Dr. Holmes. What advances have there been regarding breast reconstruction?
Well, there's several areas. One area is in the use of tissue flaps, such as the tissue from the abdomen or the tissue from the back to reconstruct the breast. So
I love that abdomen thing because you get a tummy tuck at the same time.
Exactly. And so
I'm practical.
That's used to reestablish the form of the breast, the shape of the breast, but we're also doing increasingly nipple and skin sparing mastectomy, so the outward appearance of the breast is normal. So there's a normal looking nipple, and the skin is fully retained. You have to select the patients appropriately. We want to make sure that the cancer doesn't involve the skin or the nipple, but if the cancer does not involve those parts, in most cases, if a woman opts for breast mastectomy, or if she's advised to have a mastectomy, it can be performed with skin and nipple sparing and with reconstruction of the breast so that she has a normal looking breast at the end of the process.
How do you go as if a woman or a man has to have reconstruction? How do you know that you're getting all of the options that are out there, and what aspect of it is covered by your insurance?
Well, the second question is easiest. It is covered, so insurance covers treatment of the affected breast as well as adjustments of the opposite breast so that they match. So whether it's a lift, reduction, mastectomy, whatever, augmentation, it can be done by, in both breasts, and it's covered by insurance. It's a law in the state of California and likely in many other states as well. Now, the issue of options is different because most times people will offer you the things that they can do, but not necessarily discuss fully those things that they can't do. So I tend to think that, you know, you have to be somewhat selective, and I tell patients you should at least spend as much time considering your surgeons as you consider the shoes you're going to buy or the blouse you're going to buy. That it shouldn't be, okay, my doc sent me to you, so you must be good, and you've offered me these options, therefore I'm going to go with you, because you might not be aware of other options. So, many people now go onto the internet and they do a bit of research, and so they see what the other options are. They should, at the very least, make sure that they discuss those options, and that if they need to have a second opinion, to see someone who can offer those other options if they are interested.
Fair enough. Back to the vitamin question. Can taking a daily multivitamin supplement be dangerous? I know we talked about it's better to get our vitamins from our food, but can taking a multivitamin supplement be dangerous? Because as this woman says, as a woman over 50 with no health insurance, I want to do the best that I can. Dr. Shufelt, I know you initially started this conversation.
So I initially started this conversation about vitamins and supplements, and there was a study that was done about 4 years ago, and I apologize for not knowing the specifics, but they did look at women who were taking supplements and vitamins every day versus women that were not, and there actually was an 11% increased risk for mortality on those that were taking supplements. So again, it goes down to getting this from your food is what I always tell my women. If you do not have a balanced diet and cannot attain that, then I oftentimes can prescribe a multivitamin.
I know that people are confused because you get so many mixed messages. I was watching television last night to our panel, and there were so many advertisements for these pharmaceuticals. Yet the side effects were more scary to me than the stuff that I had. I mean, how does a consumer know what they should be taking and what they shouldn't?
I mean, it goes back to we have a pill for everything now. And instead of turning to that, I mean, the whole mind, body, wellness, knowing your body, exercising, having a healthy lifestyle, not being stressed. I mean, those are things that we have to do instead of turning to a pill for everything. But you're right. I mean, those side effects are just worse than the symptoms.
Supplements and medications, I think, do have their place. So you answered it already. You have to have an excellent relationship with your primary physician and rely on his or her wisdom for your particular situations.
But there are some medications that should be taken. Mm-hmm. And if you have health conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and other things, yes, your medication might have a list of 15 potential side effects, but most people don't experience those side effects or experience very few of those side effects. And if they do, then there are often other medications that they can take instead to treat the condition. Not to treat the side effect, but just an alternative medication that might have a different response. We encounter this problem frequently in the treatment of breast cancer because not only do we recommend chemotherapy, which is only needed for a small percentage of women, but most breast cancer survivors have to take a daily medication called, let's say, like tamoxifen or medication like Arimidex or similar medications that's given to reduce the risk of breast cancer recurrence. It significantly reduces the risk of breast cancer recurrence by a half or more, but we're sometimes challenged by patients simply fearing the label, not fearing the medication because they haven't tried the medication, but they just fear the long list of potential side effects. So I always encourage them to give it a shot. You can always decide that you're not going to continue it if the side effects are onerous. But if it's been recommended, if we have lots of data to show that it works, that it reduces recurrence, improves survival, it's worthy to consider it. Try it.
Dr. Shufelt, you want to just join in?
And I would echo that by these medications are life-saving for heart disease. And whenever I prescribe a new medication, I try to avoid prescribing 2 medications on the same day. I space them apart in case there are side effects. You'll know which one's which. And I always, always, always tell my women the top 2 side effects that are reported back to me. And I let them know that this is a very minimal percentage of women that get them, but I have heard it. And if you get them, we can switch you to a cousin drug that was just as effective, that maybe metabolized differently in your body. So just have that open conversation with your relationship with your primary care doctor or cardiologist or breast surgeon.
You have to also be a little patient and allow the medication to do what it's supposed to do. I have to take, because my thyroid was irradiated all those years ago, I have to take Synthroid. And it took several months to get it to the right level. Well, now, I mean, I've been taking it for years and years and years, decades, and it's at the right level. But they do check every year to make sure that the doctor does not need to adjust that. So we do have to be patient and allow the medications to work within our body. Richard, I have a question also for you. How do I, as a woman, encourage my guy to be more active in his own health care? You're a hypochondriac, so.
Getting her guy to what?
Be more active in his own health care. Care about it. Show up at the doctor, basically.
It's a very simple way. Cut him off.
That's good. I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. And a hush fell over Jerusalem. Okay. Basically, and you can cut off lots of different things. You're not lots of different things.
I didn't go that far, but
yes. I got you. I'm going to move on. Now, this is a very interesting question. I was 115 pounds in high school. I'm going to slap her already. Now, 150 pounds and approaching 70 years. Bless your heart. What's the best way to determine the best weight for my age?
Oh, this is easy. You can just Google this one. There are online calculators all over the place. What you want to put in there is body mass index.
I hear a whole lot about that, body mass index. What is body mass index?
It's your height in centimeters divided by your weight. No, your weight. What is it? It's meter squared, right? If you do the metric, it's weight divided by...
They'll convert it. Just if the
weight in kilograms over meter squared, right? And that's why you got to go online and Google it. Don't ask me.
So it becomes, there's a real calculation. You just put your numbers in and it'll adjust you.
And then it tells you, well, you said that you were morbidly obese.
Yeah.
So if you had put in your 5'5" and 307 pounds...
It would have exploded the computer.
Well, what it would have done, though, is put your BMI at over 40. So 40 is morbidly obese, over 30 is obese, 20 to 25 is where you want to be, 24 to 30 is where you want to be. I don't know, go online.
Right.
But it tells you where you are.
But the concept is it takes into consideration your height and your body size.
And your age.
And there are age-related considerations as well. And it tells you what you should be. So it gives you a recommendation, or at least a goal, as to what you should be. So, we all come in different shapes and sizes, and we can adjust that some. But it gives you some parameters in which to, say, okay, I'm on target. I should lose 10 pounds. I should gain 5 pounds because some people are underweight. And so it gives you a range that's considered to be ideal.
We have time for just one last question, and this comes from somebody in Boston who's watching the program. She said that more women die of lung cancer than breast cancer, ovarian, and colon cancer combined, and a lot of those women never even smoked. Can we address the preventative practices of lung cancer? But I also want to add to that, why do we still smoke in 2012? Because are we like the only civilized people that don't understand manufacturing toxic and put it in our bodies will kill us?
Stick that to me.
Yeah, I will. Stick you right in there, Doc.
So this is a real calling to get advocacy for smoking cessation.
Yes.
and statewide programs for smoking cessation, because the people that are smoking are the hardest to stop. And these are the ones that are at the higher risk for heart disease or breast cancer or cancers in general, lung cancers. There was a study out of Pueblo, Colorado, where they banned smoking in restaurants, smoking outside, and the heart attack rate dropped by 42% in that, as compared to the surrounding cities. That's why we have advocacy to stop smoking in restaurants and on airplanes. And this is a real calling to get it out.
Diet, exercise, smoking cessation, and advocacy. Those are the words, the buzzwords that I have heard around this panel today. Richard, did
early detection.
I want to readdress that question about getting your man to...
You thought of it, huh?
I thought, yeah, it's almost selfish not to take care of your health.
Very good.
And if you think about your family and think about the long-term effects of having bad health, of mixed diagnosis of things, you're not doing a service to the one you love if you don't get your body checked out. Lay that on him. and think about the...
I love it. You never live that down. I can share with you as I wrap this up that thank you all very, very much. It was fantastic. When Scotty first said that I flew out from New York, on my way here, I was struck by, on the airplane, when they're giving you the instructions from the flight attendants, that flight attendants always say in case of emergency, the oxygen mask will deploy, and you are to put on your own oxygen mask before you help someone else with theirs. So I encourage you to put on your own oxygen mask and take control of your own health. You're no good to anyone dead, and your family needs you. Your community needs you. And she who has health has hope, and she who has hope has everything. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.